Hey there, and welcome back to another episode of the Relationship School's Smart Couple Podcast. What's going on? I'm Jayson Gaddis. I'm your host, and I am grateful to be alive, helping the planet with relationships. So thanks for being one of the people out there that cares about this conversation and that also wants to make a difference in this crazy world through the vehicle of connection and relationship. It is essential right now that we learn how to work out our differences. And although this podcast is about long-term relationship, doing that well, it's also full of helpful guidance on how to work out your differences with friends, family members, coworkers, and other people that you might have big challenges with their values, okay? All right, and welcome if you're new. Psyched to have you here. Okay, in this episode, I have got a fellow podcaster, Neil Sattin of Relationship Alive. Some of you I know listen to Neil's podcast, and so it's fun to have you listening here and getting some wisdom from Neil's interviews. He's a great interviewer. I was on his podcast recently, and check that out if you want more details. And this was really fun because I asked him if he would be willing to come on with his wife, and she came on. And so this interview is with the two of them. And I just had a blast. They're really a sweet couple. They're sensitive, thoughtful, caring, and committed as hell to growth and development, which I really respect. So they, like my wife and I, employ all kinds of tools and tricks to work out their differences. And they're always learning the latest research, brain science, relationship, couple stuff, because Neil interviews so many amazing people. And also because Chloe's just seems to me that kind of person that is geeked out on growing and awakening into who she is. And so they seem like anyway, just the vibe I got was that they're awesome. And I think you're going to like them too. So let me read a little bit about these two. Neil Sattin is the host of the popular podcast Relationship Alive, where he talks to world's experts on how to love right and do well in partnership. People like John Gottman, Sue Johnson, Stan Tatkin, and so many other people. I mean, just go to his podcast on iTunes and you'll see. And he's a writer, an Infinity Practitioner with over 15 years experience in the field of relationship coaching and healing. And I think we met through a mutual friend, Pete. So thanks, Pete. Pete Sharp, what's up, of the Rail Splitters. It's a bluegrass band. And then Chloe Urban, his wife, is a certified Infinity Practitioner who works with clients all over the world, along with trainings in Infinity, shamanism, relationship healing, and coaching modalities. She's also a skilled conscious dance facilitator and an artist, and they met dancing. She was raised with the medicine wheel teachings and has spent years steeped in ancient wisdom through journeys, ceremony, and connecting with the earth. Together, they're co-founders of the New Love Paradigm, where they work with couples and singles individually and together to overcome obstacles to profound growth and connection. They have a flagship 7-week online course called Thriving Intimacy. That's on their website. And they also produced a course for Daily Om, which is called 21 Days to Deeper Intimacy. Okay. NeilSattin.com, ChloeFaithUrban.com, and NewLoveParadigm.com. Okay. These guys are busy. And this is a rich interview. You'll notice in the first half of the interview, I am diving deep into their relationship, how they met, why they fought before they really got together, what was that about, and how they worked through it. You're also going to hear some tips for people if you're listening and you have kids and your partner doesn't, and you're going to blend the families together. And one of you is going to take on being a parent, like Terry Cole did. Terry has also been interviewed here on the podcast. It's really helpful to hear how couples navigate these kind of challenges. And then we hear basically how they work through challenges, conflicts, some of their favorite tools, and we end with some thoughts on their spiritual life together and why that matters to them and what to do if, you're with someone who's not into growth and development like you. Okay, so enjoy this one. Leave us a comment, please. Let us know if this was of value to you, and I hope you enjoy it. So here's this marvelous couple Neil and Chloe. Welcome to the show, Chloe and Neil.
Thanks for having us.
Awesome to be here.
Yeah. Neil, you and I have spoken before on your podcast and just outside of your podcast. And I'm grateful for that time I've gotten with you, and psyched to meet your wife here and get into you guys and how you do relationship and how that can help others. So, Chloe, I'm psyched to meet you and have you here as well.
Yeah, it's so nice to meet you too.
Cool. So, guys, give us a little info. We did the bios a minute ago, and I'm curious, tell us a little bit about how long you guys have been together, where you met, how long you've been together, kids, no kids, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, we met, 5 plus a few months, 5 years ago. And Neil has kids. So we have a 9 and 11-year-old. So I'm a stepmother.
Bonus mom.
A bonus mom, as we call it.
Nice.
So we have them half-time. And that's been an interesting journey for us, and for me in particular, just really finding my way through that and how to show up and be there for the family and all of that. And yeah, you want to add?
That pretty much says it. We met in a dance class, actually, doing contact improvisation.
Nice.
And Chloe had just moved to Maine, and it was like the first class she showed up at, and we got randomly partnered together to do this exercise.
Oh,
and wow. That was it. Yeah.
That was it.
Who put the moves on who first?
It was totally her.
What? No, I don't know about that. He was the one who offered me his bathtub.
Neil, that's pretty fast.
I was in an apartment and I didn't have a bathtub and my neck was hurting, and it's funny because he actually had an apartment open in his apartment building, and it had an extra tub, so he gave me the key to use the bathtub. And that to me was really maybe the first move. So I think it was you.
I don't know. I felt like it was when you said you were fascinated by Aquarians.
So who knows who put the first move on you?
Clearly, we got to get this story straight before what comes out.
And then how did you guys have a long courtship, or was it, some couples are just head over heels quickly and some date for years? Like, what was it like for you guys?
Yeah, we did have a long courtship and somewhat of a rocky courtship, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we broke up quite a few times in the beginning of the relationship, and it took us 2.5 years to really get to a full wholehearted yes. And I think that partly was just, I think we both were working through a lot of like, how in the heck do you do this thing called relationship in a healthy way, and facing just different challenges in that, and trying to kind of dismantle codependency together. And it just was like a lot of facing some shadows and really trying to sort through how to do it and how to do it in a healthy way.
Yeah, definitely figuring out what we were choosing. And there was a lot on the table, like with my bringing kids into our relationship.
Right.
And
that for me was a deal breaker. I mean, I was pretty young when we met, and it was just like, wait, what? I'm supposed to take care of a 4 and 6-year-old now and share my partner with kids. And, it was a lot for me to come to a yes to them too.
Was that part of the nature of your arguments and disagreements in the beginning, in those 2 years of rockiness?
A lot of it was that. And then a lot of it was just...
Yeah, I mean, when we met, I was also relatively recently out of my previous marriage. So, it had been about a year. So I was still figuring out, like, do I want to be committed with one person? What am I even looking for? And, especially toward the end of my first marriage, things were really hard for me. So I wasn't particularly eager to dive into another committed situation.
Yeah. And I just feel like we both are super growth oriented people, and I think when we met, it was this like, whoa, this person brings out the most beautiful parts of me and presence and connection, but with that illuminates all the stuff that I haven't looked at yet or haven't been asked to look at yet. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
So like relationships, like my previous partners might not have even asked me to show up and be present and be in a relationship where we're really, you know, working together to work through our shit, basically.
Yeah.
And so I think we both, when we met, it was like, oh, wow, this is a place where a lot of growth can happen. A lot of super deep connection can happen. And yet, are we truly ready for that? And how do we show up for each other in that and look at some stuff that was hard?
So it was compelling enough, it sounds like in the beginning, like there was a real draw both of you had, but there was all the practical stuff like kids and I just got out of a marriage and all this other stuff you had to work through.
Yeah, for sure.
Exactly.
Yeah. Nice. And in that working through process, what do you feel like started to work? Like what was it that you two did? Because I'm imagining there's couples in your, you know, listening right now in your situation, and they're maybe fresh. One of them's out of a relationship or a marriage, and one of them maybe has kids, and it's like, oh, this is kind of complicated. Wait, but there's this big draw. Like what would advice, I guess, would you give a listener if they're in that situation?
Great question. There are a few things that come up. You want to?
No, you go first.
Well, the first thing that pops in is actually get help. Like we got help really soon. In fact, I think maybe a year and a half in, we were doing couples work with somebody and really having them show us or help us through some of our blind spots, because with how big we were asking each other to get and how present and how intimate, it was like we weren't going to get there without the help. And I think that that's one of the biggest issues, is that people wait too long to ask for help or find a podcast or whatever it is to build your toolbox. I mean, we're not taught how to do relationship in schools, you know, so how do we know? Well, we got to research, we got to find the help. And I think that if we hadn't, I don't know if we would be here, period. Yeah. So that was the first thing that came up. But how about for you?
Yeah, I think the next thing that comes up for me is probably getting really clear on what your experience of each other is, maybe apart from all of the extenuating circumstances. And also just accepting right from the beginning that there are going to be things that need to be worked through. Because I think for us, that was another thing where we were willing to just be like, okay, we're in this. And the fact that it's not honeymoon perfect, that to us wasn't a sign that it was something wrong. Right. We were more drawn to like, what are our values? What are the things that are important to us? And the ways that we shared those things have become, I think, for us, the glue that's held us together through some really challenging times. Part of that story was like a breakup that we thought was probably going to be final. And we even I went through the conscious uncoupling process. I know you've had Catherine Woodward Thomas on your show, and like I went through that, and we were pretty sure we were headed on our way out. And then at the last minute, we just realized that we weren't done. But so I think another thing too is to, when things come up, for each of us, not making the other person responsible. And we've been...
That's what I was going to say.
Oh, okay. Well, sometimes that we're not always successful at that, right? But for the most part, owning our stuff and being willing to own it in the presence of each other has also been.
Yeah, for sure. And also just one thing to add to that piece there is also, I think what got us to a point of being a full yes was coming to the realization that choosing each other was really us choosing ourselves. Like me being with Neil supported me being who I am fully in the world.
That's huge, right?
And that is so big, you know. It wasn't like, you know, me letting him go, in fact, like wasn't necessarily serving me and my healing and my growth and my potential, but him being in my life was just helping me find me and choose me over and over again, and realize that, again, he's not responsible for my happiness or contentment, but that he's just helping me feed. He's feeding that choice for me choosing me.
How did you, that's so amazing. How did you, right before you had that insight or that awareness, where were you? Like, where was your consciousness or mindset around, well, I don't think it's going to work. And, you know, like, I'm just curious what the storyline was, and then what made it shift?
Yeah. Well, the storyline was like, I can't do this thing called being a stepmother. Like, this is too hard for me, or this is too much. And I feel like the kids got a lot of, it was almost like scapegoating them, because once I was like, fine, I'm a yes to the kids, it was like, oh, there's a lot of stuff here that I'm terrified of. Like, I think humans, all of us have a certain amount of fear of intimacy, right? So when we're up against that, it felt like that everything was going towards the kids. And I was just trying to like I was afraid to really step in fully to what it meant to be in a conscious relationship and with someone that really pushes my edges to grow and look at myself in a daily way. And I had that awareness. It really came down to, like, we had been separated. I had moved out. We maybe 3 months of full out, we're doing this and we're not going to get back together. And I was just, something in me, it was like, why did I keep wanting to come back? Like, there was something there. And it wasn't just like this, you know, some people, I think it's just, they're so afraid of being alone that they stay and they kind of grasp on.
Yeah, it kind of feels desperate, right?
Healthy.
Yeah,
exactly. For me, it was like, no, I was dealing with my own stuff, but whoa, what just keeps me coming back? And it was in a session with somebody that just helped me really come to like that realization of like, wow, Neil, like, I might be feeling resistance because he's the very thing that's going to get me through to another side of growth. Like, you know how there's like that glass wall, and it's like, or the glass ceiling of awareness, right? And then you want to like figure out your way. Once you break the ceiling, how do you now get to your new norm? And I feel like that was a real glass ceiling for me, of like breaking through just this fear, this unconscious fear of being in a super conscious, fulfilling, yet, you know, growth focused relationship. So does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. If I understand you right, it wasn't out of fear and desperation that you wanted to come back to Neil. It was out of choosing yourself. Like, somehow he was the right person to hold up the mirror in such a way that had you want to step into yourself more.
Exactly.
Wow, that's powerful. I think that's just for you listeners, that's to me a wonderful way to look at a partnership like that these guys have, is being able to, because so many people see it as like, I'm going to lose myself, right? Not, I'm going to choose myself here.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And Neil, for your side of that, would you add anything, or like, I'm just curious about what was going on for you, but also if you have anything to add to what she said.
Yeah, well, first, I've just been enjoying, because like Chloe's totally on fire right now, and I'm really just like appreciating how everything you have to say. So no, I don't think I can really add much. Though what popped up for me was, for some reason, all during that period of uncertainty, and even though I was going through conscious uncoupling, I was holding a pretty firm yes in me, but I didn't. But then when Chloe finally decided she was a yes, I was like, whoa, wait a minute.
Oh shit.
Oh, shit,
Am I a
exactly.
yes, actually? I don't know.
I changed my mind.
Yeah, it took you a few months to get there.
Yeah.
And then I had to hold the firm yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
So funny.
I also was in there, and I think this is important for people with kids. I mean, I can't make this value call for you if you have kids, but when I finally realized, like, I love this woman, and if she can't choose the whole thing, for me, being a father and showing up really fully in my children's lives was so important to me that, you know, for a while, I felt really torn back and forth, because it felt like, oh, you know, maybe I'm going to have to choose to live kind of a separated life where I have my kids and Chloe's out of the picture. And then when my kids are with their mama, then Chloe's in the picture. And so I got really clear that that wasn't okay for me, that I wanted to feel like I was creating family anew. And I wanted someone who could be a yes to the kiddos and see them in their glory, even though kids in that kind of situation, it's just like by design meant to push the bonus person's buttons. You know, it's just gonna happen.
Yeah.
So,
but you wanted the package
for that initiation.
You what? Sorry, what would you say?
I was just saying, get ready for that initiation in my shoes, because it is just the nature of it, I think.
Yeah, and that has its own, like, that's another conversation. I'd love to ask you a couple of questions about that, just because coming into a family that's already existing has got a whole set of, you know, beautiful challenges of itself, right?
That's for sure.
Okay, so Neil, but back to you. Will you say, like, I just kind of lost my train of thought there, something about, the package deal. You were clear that it was a package with me, like the whole, you got me and the kids. It's not me and then the kids on weekends kind of thing.
Exactly. And I took a really strong stand for that with Chloe in a way that I hadn't up until then. Yeah. Which I think, I'm guessing, was helpful for you, because then Chloe got even more clarity on what saying yes meant.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. What she was saying yes to. Because this is where a couple could, an individual, one of you, like Neil, you could have held back and said, well, I don't want to lose Chloe, so I'll sort of agree to these sort of terms where I have to, like, separate my kids out of the picture a little bit.
Right.
Yeah. So it's powerful. You did that. You stood in your clarity. So she comes forward, and then something happened to you. Did I hear that right? That, like, she stands in her yes, or you're standing in your yes. She's like, okay, fine, I'm here. And then you had to confront a new layer of your intimacy stuff. Is that right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And yeah, thinking back on that was a big process of also recognizing that my own willingness to grow. And I knew that Chloe, just like she was saying about me, I knew that she was going to not allow me to slack off, and that she was going to challenge me, and that it was going to require probably more of me than any situation that I had ever been in before. And I got really excited about that. So, like, that excitement was what brought me more clearly into yes than I'd even been prior to that. Yeah. Wow. I think some of my yes that I was holding was about maintaining some degree of safety for me in that situation. And then once Chloe was willing to hold it, it let me really pursue the edges of what I was really asking for and what I wanted. And I'm sorry, you know, after all these years that I put you through that.
Oh, jeez. We put each other through a lot.
Would you say, Neil, I talk about non-negotiable needs sometimes in my classes, and it sounds like that was a non-negotiable need in a way that you stated with your family. Was that fair, or what would you call it?
Yeah, I would say that's true. Yeah. So there was that, and there was also, you know, because of our age difference, that was the other thing that was really important for me, where I was just like, you know, I am who I am. I'm as old as I am. I have 2 kids. Like, it's all of me. That's like, that's who you get. And if that's not what you want, then okay. But I'm not I think in that moment too, that was for me a clear choosing around what you said, Jayson, just saying, okay, this is me. I'm not going to compromise who I am to be in this as amazing as this person is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Back to like choosing ourselves. What do you think? What do you guys think prevents people from standing in that kind of clarity in oneself in terms of what they want or need?
Great question.
Yeah. So what keeps people from standing in that clarity? Probably fear more than anything else.
That's what I was going to say. Fear is the first thing that pops in.
Mm-hmm.
And so many of our fears are kind of unconscious, right? Like we don't actually know what exactly we're afraid of, but they kind of show up in weird ways in our lives. And to me, it's just like, yeah, if you're just like, there's some sort of resistance and there's stuff just like energetically just getting in the way, you know, what I just start to kind of get really curious, like, what is this? Like, what is going on? What is blocking me from being clear here?
Mm-hmm.
And why am I, whether I'm being wishy-washy or I am just like terrified of finding my truth or whatever that is, because if I find my truth, maybe it'll be too risky or I'll lose something or I'll lose someone or, you know, all of that. So I think that so much of it is really getting willing to get a little uncomfortable and kind of, I mean, we work actually a lot with the primal brain and like our survival, right? And how the primal brain has these particular needs and fears and love and being loved, safety and being safe, acknowledgement, validation and approval, and abandonment and being abandoned. And usually we have more than one of these kind of primal fears that we kind of live into in our lives. And to me, you're probably, in most cases, you're bumping up against one of those kind of primal fears. Like if you step in and say, okay, this is what I need, or this is what I want, and it's full and it's clear, like you're risking being abandoned, you know, you're risking maybe not getting love back, you're risking not being safe, you're risking all those things, or acknowledged for your yes.
Yeah.
So that to me is, that comes up first, I think, is just really kind of beginning to be humble and dismantle a little bit of what it is that you bump up against.
Yeah. And when you say it that way, it makes sense, right? As I listen, I'm like, oh, right. Those are all really valid fears. So it would make sense if I held back then my truth or what I wanted, you know?
Right.
Right. The irony being that if you hold back your truth, in the end, that's, I think, what creates the dysfunction in relationship that leads to those fears being realized in some fashion.
Yeah.
So
agreed.
Right. I mean, and that to overcome that, you can do it in a lot of different ways. And it usually comes from like a younger part of ourself, like a wounded part. So how do you kind of get curious as to what, you know, where that came from, or how to begin to heal that part of yourself so that you can move forward and not be completely, you know, taken over by that part or that fear just really taking over.
Yeah, there are a couple of things that come to me too, that just to like kind of fully flesh out that, like, why don't we stand in who we are? And, you know, one of those things is, I think, for me, when I found myself in relationship, there's that feeling of exhilaration and like I've been completed, and there's so much kind of dopamine driven.
None of us know what you're talking about.
Safety. That's not real safety.
Right.
Yeah. But it's kind of like, well, how I was being was what got me into this place. Like, here I am in this relationship, but now I have to, which by the way, also is something where there's so much in our culture around like how you ensnare the perfect match, or, you know, how you, how you, you know, say, you got to say the right thing, or, you know, not do the wrong thing, or
don't be yourself, really.
Right. There's so much that's about not
play
doing
the game.
that in order to, you know, not turn someone off, that so many of us find ourselves in relationship kind of not based out of authenticity.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been so affected by Ken Page's work, which is all about basing your attraction on who you are and your authentic self. And that being said, I was not there when we met. I was just like, wow, I wonder, like, she's gorgeous and amazing. And, I wasn't thinking about it in a way that was about like, is this person gonna like help me grow and be a brighter version of myself? It took time to get there.
Yeah.
So I think that most people aren't there. And then that's what leads them to like, whoa, okay, if I'm going to let this person see all of me, every part of me, then I bump up against those fears that Chloe mentioned.
Yeah. The bottom line being like, they might go away. Right.
Right.
Yeah.
If I really am myself, you might go away.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Which could be an abandonment fear, or it could be I'm not going to get love fear, or, some people really are dependent on the other for that feeling of physical safety.
Mm-hmm.
And so they're all, or the acknowledgement piece, so it could be each of those things. I think in my experience with clients, a lot of them are just like, I'm afraid of being alone, or I'm afraid of being abandoned. But I think it's helpful to
tease it out.
Yeah,
that's great. And kind of on the safety issue, how do you guys deal with sort of the term safety in your own relationship? How does safety play a role? Would you guys say something about that?
Oh my gosh, in so many ways. I think it's just like the absolute keystone of having a healthy, lasting relationship, because without that safety, how are you going to be able to fully relax into who you are and also show up, intimately, sexually, all of it? It kind of all comes back to that, we call it, the container of the relationship. And it has been quite a wild, amazing ride with us finding safety. And I feel like it's come in waves. Like, okay, we get the first like initial piece of what safety means, what container means, what are our agreements, like really honing in and talking about, and not being afraid to talk about those things. Like, what are we agreeing to here? And, even if you're afraid to touch on a topic, like, it's important to have these conversations, is this exclusive? Are you, are we here? Are we doing this just you and me? And what does that look like? And what does that mean? And like really getting clear on some of those things. And I think we've had maybe 5 or 6 times of like, I feel like maybe even once a year, basically, of just like the reiteration and revisiting what our agreements are to keep the container of the relationship solid and safe, for sure. And I think that that's really key and important in any relationship to have those conversations. I mean, we've talked, people who have taken our courses and we're talking about the container and safety, and they're 30 years into their relationship and they've never even really talked about like agreements or,
exits
or how they might, their energy might be, exits being like where your energy might leak from the container of the relationship, right? So it's wild to me that isn't more of like a front and center, this is where you start kind of conversation.
Can you guys...
So we really urge people to have that conversation.
Yeah, agreed. Can you give us like an example of an agreement that might help with safety that you guys have?
Yeah. So we have an agreement that when one of us is triggered, everything stops, and we don't try to like figure things out. we figure out how to come back to being regulated, and then we go back to figuring things out.
Right. So that's really an agreement that like keeps as much really intense conflict out of the relationship as possible. Not that it doesn't ever escalate to that point. Sometimes we don't catch it, but that piece is like really around safety of that intensity, bringing that, like, you know, those fights that it's just like, oh man, what just happened? Like, I don't even know what I said, you know, and how do we just like take that time to breathe, center, even if we have to leave the room for 10 minutes, like whatever it is that we've got to do to come back, that piece is huge. So that would be
that's great.
Example.
And if you're both triggered, same thing?
Yep, same thing. We really try to just like one of us call each other out as fast as possible to catch it, you know?
Yeah. I mean, we've gotten to the point, I think, where we're pretty good at taking ownership of our triggers. So like I'm triggered, I need space, or I need you to just help me come back online. And we have some techniques and ways that we do that. And also we've had in the past like code words and ways of, you know, calling the other out where we're not just being like, you're triggered, you know, like get together, you know? Being able to do something playful or funny has also saved us a lot when.
Play, right? It's humor.
Oh my gosh, huge.
God, so big. Pardon me, folks. Here is a quick interruption from our sponsor, the Relationship School. Do you know your relationship score? Have you taken the relationship test to assess your weaknesses and your strengths? It's always fascinating to me that people actually don't know what to focus on. So if you go to a good relationship coach, for example, they'll tell you exactly where it seems like your weaknesses are. And you can get a self-assessment here on our website, relationshipschool.net/relationship test. Just enter your email and download a one-page PDF with 25 questions. It takes you about 10 minutes to fill out or less, and it'll show you what you need to work on. And then you can go work on it here at the Relationship School or somewhere else. Sound good? Okay, folks, we'll see you in there. Back to Chloe and Neil. Can you give the listener maybe one tip that works for you guys on repairing? So I heard, you know, taking personal responsibility. Basically, everything stops when we get triggered. And in terms of the repairing the rupture or the disconnection, what's another technique or a hack that you guys use that works?
Yeah. Well, it seems so simple, but for me, I think one of the biggest pieces and really like it can sometimes feel like, oh my God, I'm like, I have to like pull myself out of quicksand. Just like, okay, I'm like, every part of me has to be on board with this. And it's like, I'm, you know, fighting my demons of like, don't do it. But really it is like coming back and owning like, oh man, you know, whether it's apologizing, but I don't even know if it's apologizing. It's really just like, wow, you know, maybe it is like, I'm really so sorry that I just did that. Or wow, I can see how I let my fear get in the way and I said that thing that was actually kind of vicious or like, or wow, my tone of voice. So just coming back to owning. And sometimes like to me, one of the biggest lessons I've learned in showing up is really just being in my humility and being willing to show that to him. And I think that that's, I mean, so much of it, all of our defense mechanisms, all of it, it's like keeping us from being in that authenticity and just being like, wow, I did fuck up. Excuse me. Are we allowed to swear on this show?
Fuck yeah.
All right, good.
But really like being willing to just own it and say, wow, I made a mistake, or wow, I was really triggered, hijacked. And
I think it's rare to, when we fight, usually when all is said and done, we've both apologized for something. So, you know, while I think it's easy to kind of fall into that adage, like, you can either be right or be married, or, you know, whatever it is that they say. I think for both of us, it's like, well, you have to be willing to be wrong, or you have to be willing to see,
to be humbled.
Yeah, to see that every single thing, it took both of us to get there. So it's
Yeah.
not always a race to be the first one to apologize. So sometimes that takes a little bit more just like centering and inner
Right. And
reflection.
just to say, don't just apologize and just to like be like, fine,
Right.
honey,
Just to
well,
get
I'm
it off your,
sorry, like, no, I
Yeah.
never come back. And even if he comes back and is like, wow, so sorry I did that, or I'm sorry it came out that way. I won't say I'm sorry. I won't apologize, or I won't own something until I'm ready. Like until I authentically, fully,
until you mean it.
wholeheartedly, or it's not
Yeah.
gonna diffuse
Nice.
the energy. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Like it's in fact it'll
Yeah.
probably make
Don't go through the motions. Like you got to mean it, right? Or Neil's not going to let down. He's not going to relax if you don't
he's
mean
not
it.
going to relax. Like his whole body is not going to find the safety and
Mhm.
relax back into being there, fully present, until
Yeah.
we have those barometers. We're reading facial expressions all the time
I
and
know.
and body language. And so
Yeah. Oh,
just
yeah.
to say, don't just like go through the motions. Definitely find, even if it takes you hours, find the place of authentically coming and owning whatever it is that you need to own.
Yeah, great. Neil, you've interviewed so many people now and just gotten a ton of wisdom from all your awesome guests and then from your own life experience. I'm just curious, has there been a favorite technique that someone else taught you that you've interviewed or a past practitioner perhaps that you infuse into your marriage now that works for you guys?
Only like 1,000 of
Yeah,
them.
so many.
Only every episode.
Right. I mean, it's funny. Like in preparing for an episode, and then afterwards, I'm always like, Chloe, you'll never guess like this thing. We're gonna try this, right? And so yeah, I'm always experimenting with things. But I think something that's been the easiest thing and that we fall back on a lot, and that bears on this conversation that we've been having about repair and getting triggered. It comes from Peter Levine's work, Somatic Experiencing, and it's the VU, which do you know about
No,
that?
Teach us about the VU.
The VU. It's French. No, it means you. No, so yeah, this comes from Peter Levine's work, and the idea is that basically when you recognize you're triggered, to say the word VU and basically to take a deep breath and then to linger on the word as long as you can. So it would be something, I'm not going to do it because I can take really deep breaths, but it would be something like this. VU. And when one of us is triggered and starts VUing, we have sort of this is an unstated agreement, but we'll VU together.
Right.
Which is fun for like harmonizing and things, but also the reason that you do it is that it's very regulating. It activates your diaphragm and opens up your your esophagus, and it has the effect of bringing back your vagal tone. This is just one way. So we'll VU for a minute, 3 minutes sometimes. I mean, sometimes it gets fun, but
right. And what is so fun is it, yes, it works to just bring you back, and it's playful. Like it's kind of ridiculous sometimes to be in the middle of something, or like the kids are freaking out in the back of the car and I'll just start VU and feels like, oh geez, it's sort of just like an acknowledging awesome. Like, wow, I'm really triggered. And yet it brings play, and it also brings that co-regulation. Like if you're doing it together and kind of, you could look into each other's eyes to help to co-regulate and bring that vagal tone back, really.
Yeah, and the right brain to right brain communication, that's huge too.
Oh, that's sweet. Okay, so listener, your job is to VU at least once this week. Okay,
right, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and there are times when we're like right in the middle of in something heated, when neither of us has thrown up the white flag yet or said I'm triggered, sorry. When one or the other of us will start VUing, and it'll be like my experience of it is like, oh, oh shit, right, like we're in it right now, like, all right, I'm vooing, like, and it's a good, it's an anchor point that reminds us about our agreement that, oh yeah, when one of us is triggered, we're not getting anywhere, so let's bring ourselves back.
Right.
Yeah, I really like that. Just what you just said. When one of us is triggered, we're not getting anywhere. And so let's like deal, which is why I like your kind of rule agreement around we stop and we deal.
Yeah.
Because so many of us, we get used to being triggered in a way, in a low grade way, and we just keep going about our day and unresolved. And it's like, who wants that
Totally.
stress? But if you grew up in a family maybe of that kind of stress, you're maybe used to it.
Oh yeah.
Regardless, I love the, stop, drop, and deal. It's just kind of shows care,
Wow,
right?
can we just totally take that saying?
Yeah.
Stop,
Mine
drop,
is like
and deal.
stop, drop, deal, feel, and get real.
Uh-huh.
If you want
Nice.
to
I
add a
like
couple
it.
layers.
Yeah.
Love it.
Yeah. So I wanted to transition before we wind down here just to ask about spirituality in relationships. I know you two have a spiritual practice. It sounds like together or separately. I'm not totally sure. Maybe you could let us in on just a slice of that, as because there's couples out there that are religious or spiritual and they do things alone and sometimes together. So I'm
Yeah.
just curious about a spiritual practice that you guys do that helps your relationship.
Mm. Well, it's been a huge part, and I think that that is really one of the big things that kept me coming back to Neil, was his willingness and wanting to go into the spiritual realms, whatever that means to him. But there was never a judgment or like, oh, that's just woo woo and I don't want to go there. Like we've always both been a real yes to just exploring. And we've done a training together for the last 4.5 years. It's called Infinity Healing. And there's so many practices we bring into our daily lives that it's incredible to be able to share that vocabulary, share that kind of depth, and really looking at the world in a much broader way. Like, we're looking at things when they come up: mental, physical, spiritual, emotional, energetic, and genetic. Like really seeing how some things can weave in, and it's like multidimensional. And having shared this training and I have a healing practice, and Neil really weaves it into his work a lot with clients. Of there's all these different tools that have come in, one being muscle testing, which is I think used in a lot of different modalities, but we muscle test every day, all the time. We'll either muscle test each other with our arms, or there's different ways to self-test. But that, we're constantly using that tool. Just in our way of looking at it is really like, what is in this moment, what is going to be most life-giving, most generative for us, and like in connection, my body connected to like my higher self, basically. Like, how can I get that kind of clarity in every decision we make in our lives? And we test food, we test what we're gonna do with the kids that day. Like, we just sort of go through all of it so that we're both living as fully aligned to our highest, purest selves that we can in each moment.
Yeah. And so we have a lot of clearings and activations and lingo that's part of how we operate with each other, and that has also come in really handy. And what you were just saying too, I think having the perspective, this is just our perspective, that we are energetically like vast beings, and rather than being like a body with a soul, we feel like we're beings with a body. And so for us, that can be really helpful when things get complicated or challenging on the plane of our physical reality and our bodies. And maybe it's just like one of us doesn't feel good, or that can enter in terms of sex and whether we're having sex or not, or who wants to, who doesn't, or how it's feeling. Being able to bring all of those other dimensions that Chloe mentioned in helps us really again, not take things personally and be willing to explore like, oh, well, what could this be? Like, if this isn't just about like, you know, I have a headache or I'm feeling a little sick, then, you know, what's actually going on? Is this an emotional thing? And maybe there's something for us to talk about, and and it becomes a way for us to bridge the gap between us. And I've also just noticed, like with clients who have their own spiritual practices, how helpful it has been for them to remember it as a resource for themselves. Like whether their partner is on board or not, to remember their own connection to whatever they call spirit or the divine, and to call upon that as a resource in challenging situations. And to operate from there. You know, what would, you know, one of my favorite questions is something like, what would love do in this moment? And can I operate from there? And since love seems to be at the core of so many religious and spiritual practices, that's probably one that a lot of people could put to use.
Yeah, that's sweet. Would you say, you guys, because you have such a great shared language there and all these amazing tools, both in your spiritual practice and then just also in relationship practice, if one of you was doing that and the other one wasn't, would you be able to have a relationship, do you think?
Good question. Because I know there's so many people out there in that very situation. And I think that it really just depends. Like some people, it might be a deal breaker and others it wouldn't be, you know, or a non-negotiable. What's your thing? Non-negotiable
need.
You know, like maybe it is a non-negotiable need that you're met fully, you know, on the spiritual plane, and that your beliefs somewhat line up so that you can have that common language. And maybe it's not, you know, for me, I think it got to the point where it was a non-negotiable need or something that was a deal breaker. But I don't think that it's a deal breaker for everybody. And I think that when you're on your own spiritual path and you personally are willing to grow and shift, and as Neil was talking about, having that connection to something greater than yourself, or, you know, from our perspective, this infinite being, this infinite resource, like having all these tools, it so infuses you, you know, and you are choosing you, and you are, you know, constantly, if you're in that spiritual practice and having tools that help you come back to regulation, come back to connection, come back to love, come back to peace, joy, bliss, whatever it is that your spiritual practice brings you back to, I mean, that's going to be huge for you and your own well-being, whether your partner is necessarily doing that particular practice or not. I think that the big piece is just that if you are in a conscious relationship, you might call it, or a growth-centered relationship, where you really, you know, are someone that wants to show up big like that, it does take a partner who's willing in some way, shape, or form to find their own way to come back to themselves, right? That they can't just be completely checked out and not willing to look at themselves or grow or shift or change, because then you might kind of be a bit stuck. But I don't think that it's like required that you both have like a shared spiritual practice by any means. What do you want to say? I know there's something there.
The question that comes up for me is more, how do you honor each other? And how do you support each other? So if your paths are different, can you still show up to illuminate your partner in their glorious connection to whatever it is? And I can see that being really challenging. Like if you were, for instance, really spiritual and you were with someone who was a total materialist, that could be really challenging to navigate. But the question is, can you navigate it? Can you show up with each other in that conversation and lean in around that conversation, as opposed to having it just be the unmentionable thing that you always wonder, you know, maybe I should have been with someone who also believed whatever.
Yeah, cool. Great advice. All right, guys, last two questions here. This has been a real treat, and I'm loving relating to you all because now I have more info on you, Neil, and it feels just nice to be able to hear a little window into your relationship. So I'm just loving that you shared that with us.
Yeah.
And I'm relating because my wife and I had some pretty intense breakups before we got pushed through to get married. And so it's pretty similar. And so the question is this, I ask all my guests if, as you may or may not know, I started this thing called the Relationship School, and I really want to get this into schools, into just young people's hands,
Yes.
relationship education, because like you said, we didn't get this class. And for example, today my wife and I went into a local high school. But if I were to talk to 1,000 teens and young adults, and you were whispering in my ear, each of you, I can only share one thing to them about relationships, what would you want me to tell them?
Oh my goodness. All of it. No.
Can we each at least have one thing? So
yeah, I'll let you each have one. Yes.
All right, you first.
Why me first? I have to narrow it down.
He's buying himself some time.
Yeah, seriously. All right, I'll go first. I don't know. Yeah.
Okay.
So, most important thing, if it could just be one thing. All right, you do one about sex.
Well, I am going to do one about sex.
All right, good. So I think it would be around presence. And we have our own way that we define presence, which isn't just about being present, but it's also the process of recognizing when you have gotten triggered, that's included in presence. So for young people, developing that awareness of when they start to go into their primal brain and recognizing that presence is a requirement for having an amazing relationship, so that they start taking responsibility for that self-awareness, and also obviously having some tools to come back online. That would be the thing that I would definitely.
Great presence. I love it. And I love how you unpack that a little bit. Okay. Chloe?
I mean, the first thing that came to me really was around sex, and it's kind of a broad and not so broad situation, but it's really about, finding consent and finding a language of like honoring each other, and how, like, really teaching how, not just being completely run by our bodies and our sexual desires, but to really step back and make sure that you're really in a mutual consent place where you both are a yes. But not only are you a yes, but how can you begin to show up in the vulnerability and to find the place of honoring that this is another human being, and that this is like, we're sharing our energy bodies, like this is emerging, and this isn't just some small thing. And how I think that the education around consent and sexuality and honoring and finding that it's not all like what you see in movies. It's not just, it doesn't have to just be quick and fast and what you see in porn and what you see all over. Like, that is not necessarily what, sex truly is. And to get curious and to find and talk about what it is that you desire and what it is that you want. And I think it's amazing to me how much there is to be taught and learned about this very topic, and how many people force themselves or don't know how to say no when they really don't want to have sex. And that whole conversation of just finding the yes and finding a place of safety to have those conversations. Do you want to add?
Yeah, just the tiniest bit, because that was so perfect what you said. And the willingness to be in the vulnerability around when you're uncomfortable or when you're curious or when you're unsure about something, for that to be okay in young relationship, so that again, that becomes something that's on the table and part of the conversation, rather than feeling like, oh, I'm somehow supposed to have this all figured out, or So if they're like, we're young, we don't got this, like, let's not get it, let's figure it out together.
Yeah. And I like how both of those weave together. Like the more present I am, the more I can be tuned into this conversation around consent and
Right.
going slow and making mistakes and stuff. So I just wanted to highlight that. Thank you guys. It was great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm going to hold that one in my heart. And where can people find you both? Just give us a little sense of how to get in touch with you if they want to follow up. Certainly, we've got Neil's podcast, so I want to obviously have you share that, Neil. But
Yeah, you want to start?
Sure. So my podcast is called Relationship Alive, and you can go to relationshipalive.com or neilsattin.com. They both take you to the same place. And I have some great free stuff, on my website too, that people can pick up all about how to communicate in relationship and how to get really clear on your needs in relationship and your partner's needs. So that would be neilsattin.com or relationshipalive.com.
Mm-hmm. And then my website is chloefaithurban.com. And that I really, basically that's all around my own healing practice, and I'll be coming out with courses and stuff there. And on that, there's also some really fun free stuff, and some of these tools that we've sort of alluded to, you can find those there. And then we have the newloveparadigm.com, which is our joined forces website, where that has also a free meditation you can pick up, and that's kind of the home to our 7-week online course called Thriving Intimacy. And it really takes you through this signature system we came up with around a thriving relationship. So
yeah. And we did also do a course for Daily Om. So if any of your listeners are Daily Om fans, you can find a course that we did for them there as well, called 21 Days to Deeper Intimacy.
Oh, wonderful. Okay, we'll include all of those links in our show notes. So listener, just go to the show notes if you want to click on something and take you right to these guys. Great.
Perfect.
Well, guys, thanks so much. It's been super sweet seeing you two together and getting a vibe from you, and also hearing about your amazing relationship.
Yeah, thanks so much for having us. It's been great.
Yeah, really great to be here, Jayson. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, guys. We'll talk again soon.
All right.
All right. Neil and Chloe. Pretty cool couple, right? Okay, they got lots of great stuff. Go check out Neil's podcast, chloefaithurban.com, and the show notes have all of those links for you. All right. Here's your action step. Remember when they talked about the VOO? Next time you're triggered, okay, I have yet to try this, but I'm going to. When I'm triggered next time, I'm going to VOO or VOO. And I want you to try it. It sounds silly, but that's part of the point, is it's playful, and it resets the nervous system, it sounds to me like. So I'm curious myself. That's my action step, and you can try that on as well. And then another tip I liked that you could try if you're a little embarrassed to do the VOO is just next time you're activated, take the view, the mindset like Chloe and Neil do, where you stop and deal. And it's just like everything stops until we address the activation and we repair and get the connection back. And I just think that's a really responsible rule of thumb. The more we learn about brain science, the more we understand how damaging it is to not repair quickly over time, and the years and the compounding allostatic load that adds up if you don't do that. All right. Okay. And finally, if you want more resources, come join our relationship school Roots community. All right. Now is the time. And remember, Roots gets you 10% off every course that we offer here at the Relationship School. That's their Indestructible Partnerships course, our End Your Struggle with Him course, a course for women. There's a lot of courses you can take and get 10% off if you're a member of the Roots community. So that's relationshipschool.net/roots. All right, folks, we'll see you in there. And until next time, here is to a strong, vibrant, beautiful connection.